morning, everybody. It's Santina Doyle from Solo Female Van Life Lessons, and here with another lesson about what I learned when I went full-time car camping because my son had COVID. So I'm here on my front porch of my apartment, which is where I spent the majority of over a week working full-time on my laptop on a busy road. It's not very busy this morning because it's Sunday morning, but with traffic noise going back and forth, everything from semi-tractor trailers to Amish buggies. They're both noisy. And so today what I want to talk to you about is what I experienced about comfort while I was living full-time in my car. And it was different than I anticipated what would happen when I went full-time. So let me explain. So I live on the East Coast of Pennsylvania, and I had planned to travel by a van, and when I retire in about 2 years, to travel all the way across the country to the West Coast, where I know the weather is so much different than it is here in the East Coast. And the time that my son got COVID was mid-July, and so we're normally beginning to really heat up in July, and it's beginning to be really, really humid. Now, when I go full-time car camping, I don't plan to stay on the East Coast during periods of really bad weather. So for instance, July and August, especially August, very hot, very humid. As well as in the wintertime when there's potential for snow and certainly cold, I was going to chase 70, just like a lot of people who are living the van life want to chase 70. But what I learned through having to live through temperatures that were only down to 70, 72 at night, which is comfortable for sleeping, but just for me, just on the cusp of comfortable, with humidity, right? 70, 72 with humidity, and sometimes thunderstorms, and goes up to 80, 82, 84. I think actually it was a hotter week than that. It was probably more like 86, not 90, but high in the upper 80s actually, now that I recall. So I wasn't able to chase 70, obviously. But it was interesting because I was able to look and see on a weather map whether or not I would be able to drive from a place that was in the upper 80s and get to a place that was cooler easily. And the answer is, at least on the East Coast, no. And certainly could not go to a place, let's say the Pocono Mountains, which are in Pennsylvania and a 3.5-hour drive from me. I certainly wouldn't be able to drive to a place with elevation, which would mean cooler temperatures, that would also allow me to work. So I could drive off hours, that's for sure, but there would be no power there. There would be no Wi-Fi there, so I wouldn't be able to work unless I guess potentially had Starlink and also had a power source. So it was very eye-opening to me that temperatures in an area don't range that much, aren't that different from the general area, certainly don't differ that much that you could drive to a different temperature. So you can't necessarily, at least on the East Coast and at least this year, you can't drive from an area that's 86 degrees Fahrenheit and get to a place that's in the 70s. You'd have to drive for days. So it's just not something that on the East Coast you're able to chase weather that easily in the summertime and probably in the wintertime as well. So that was a lesson that I certainly learned. Now on the West Coast or in other parts of the country, can you move from one location that's going to warm up or have a storm, etc., and move to another location? Probably more easily, but what I would say is probably not as easily as I would hope that I could just pick up and drive for a couple of hours and get to a much better, comfortable weather condition. I think it's going to be fairly similar in that you do have to drive pretty long distances in order to get such a dramatic change in the weather. And I do follow a couple of YouTubers that are full-time van lifers, and they have experienced unpleasant weather conditions, especially in their vans, because obviously if you're in 80-degree temperatures, your van heats up even more than that. And so what I would say is that what I learned from this experience of my son having COVID and having to live full-time out of my car just at my apartment, which you'd think would be extremely convenient, right? Was that comfort in the van is not going to be as easily found as comfort in a house. It's one thing to step outside during the day and experience the heat and then go back inside for a cold drink. But when you're full-time van life, you don't have that ability. And you are outside 100% of the time, even if you're in your vehicle. And so the comfort is different. The comfort is actually not there. You are uncomfortable for a good portion of your time in your van life. And I'm a creature of comfort. I don't like to be uncomfortable. I don't go camping when it's extremely hot and humid, and I don't go camping when it's really cold and there's wintry weather. So what does that mean for me in my full-time van life? I'm not sure yet. Again, I was planning on heading out to the West Coast, where I think that I do check the temperatures periodically, and the temperatures are much more conducive to what I want to live in. But as I'm traveling around and seeing the sights and going to various national parks, I know now more than I did before that I'm going to encounter uncomfortable situations, uncomfortable temperatures, and uncomfortable weather, and I'm going to have to decide whether it's worth it to me or not to experience those discomforts. I'm not going to be able to afford to get a hotel room if there's a heat wave. And so I either need to be willing to stick it out, or I'm going to turn around and find a home. Not sure how that's going to pan out. But what I can tell you is that there are things that you can do to be as comfortable as possible. One of the things that I had purchased right before this experience, which was just synchronicity, was a tent for the back of my hatchback, which I would not have been able to survive the week and a half of high temperatures during the day without having that tent to provide shade to me, to provide shade to the car so that the car did not get hot, as hot, and to certainly provide a screened in window for me, huge screened in window, the whole back of my hatchback, for sleeping at night in relatively comfortable temperatures of 70, 72. When you're in a car, because it's a confined space, it tends to heat up a lot faster than when you're in a tent. And so it was a little less comfortable sleeping in the hotter temperatures as a result of that, even with the tent on the back. But what I would say is, before you go full-time, if you're planning on going full-time, to really try out. Two huge RVs just went by, a Class A and a fifth wheel. But anyway, safe travels, guys. But to try out your equipment that will try to make your camping experience as comfortable as possible, try it out in those extreme circumstances before you go full-time. And figure out what you will do if there's a heat wave or a winter storm, and have a plan B. And the worst thing, I think, is to get on the road and then experience some of those discomforts, and your only bug out plan is to grab a $75 or $100 or $150 hotel room. That might give you comfort temporarily, but if you're not very well off, as I'm not going to be in my retirement, that's going to be a bitter pill to swallow, to spend that kind of money on just a hotel room. that you have to leave by 11 o'clock the next day. So try the uncomfortable camping. I've always stuck with comfortable camping, only going when the temperatures were ideal and when the weather was going to be good. And now I've learned that I need to stretch myself and I need to camp in uncomfortable situations to determine what I need in order to make it as comfortable as possible when I go full time. So definitely some kind of screens are a must for the hot weather, and also a way of getting air into your vehicle that is not that you can use while there's a storm, a thunderstorm or rain. So I did waterproof with the same waterproofing spray that you use on a tent to waterproof it. I waterproofed that hatchback tent that I purchased, and I did experience some rainstorms, and it did very well. I didn't have any leaks, even though I showed you in the previous video when I showed you the tent that I purchased, that they had sewed a part of the fabric that wasn't supposed to be sewed, and then they had removed the stitches and it left sewing holes. But I didn't experience any water coming through any of that, so that was good. I probably am going to purchase some other things for my vehicle. For instance, I don't have rain guards currently on my windows. They're the little pieces of plastic that cover the top of your window so that you can crack your window in the rain and not get rain in as long as it's not blowing. And you can also, when you crack your window, you can't see that it's cracked, so you can get ventilation that way, in a stealth kind of way. I'm going to purchase some rain guards, and I'm probably going to wind up purchasing screens for all 4 of my windows. Besides the hatchback tent that I have, which is just one big solid screen, which I love, and it's like a tent, it zippers so that I can get out of the hatchback as well. I'm probably going to purchase the screens for all 4 of my side windows, because it was, when the temperature was up there at night, I guess 76 was the highest temperature that I experienced. Even with the back being full screen, it was very still that night, and there was no breeze coming from the back of my car. And I don't think there was any breeze anywhere, or I would have just pivoted my car in my driveway and pointed the screen to the prevailing wind. But it was a very still night. And I have one screen for one side door, which I did put on to enable any kind of cross breeze if there was any kind of breeze whatsoever. And my friend Sabrina gave me this screen. Thank you, Sabrina. But it wasn't, there just wasn't a breeze, and it was uncomfortable. I made it through, but it was an uncomfortable night. And I think if I had the 4 screens for all 4 of my windows, I would have at least gotten a little bit more air. Now, those screens, you can get them on Amazon. Because they're double-sided, it's like a sock that you put over your doors. They don't appear to, unless there's a nice breeze, they don't appear to let a very gentle breeze in, because they're double-sided. They're more solid than if it was just a single screen like you have in your house, a single screen, right? Not a double screen. And so I might actually modify them. I might purchase them and then modify them in some way so that it's just a single screen. I'll let you know. But that was my lesson that I learned when my son had COVID about comfort, and how I thought that I had all of the apparatus that I needed in order to be comfortable on the road, but I actually don't yet. And that I need to perform some more trial runs before I can feel like I will be comfortable on the road no matter what the temperature and no matter what the weather. And so what I would suggest that you take from this lesson is, don't avoid the uncomfortable camping situations. Use them if you're planning on going full-time. Use your part-time van life now to work out what you need for full-time van life to be as comfortable as possible on the road, but also know that you're probably going to be in situations in your van life, possibly on a regular basis, that are going to be uncomfortable, and know how you're going to get through those situations and have a plan. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Safe travels, everybody, and I'll talk to you next week.